we can jump into where we left off last week, which was Judges chapter 16. So if you'll go ahead and open up your Bibles to the book of Judges once again, we have this Sunday and next Sunday, and then we're done with the book of Judges, okay? But I want to just kind of bring you up to speed a little bit about where we've been. We are currently studying the life of Samson, as he is this judge that we've been looking at now. And just kind of a reminder as well, a judge was not what we think of as a judge being today. It's not like they hold a gavel, wear the black robe, and make verdicts, right? A judge in Bible times, by Bible definitions, was a military leader that God raised up to help deliver and rescue His people from the oppression, from the enemies that were coming against her. And today we're learning once again about the story and life of Samson, probably the most well-known of the judges. His life, I think, as we're going to jump in here to Judges chapter 16, kind of reminds me of a beautiful house. Maybe you are in the process of building or buying a new home, and if you are in the process of that, or if you just recently purchased a new home, one of the things that you will probably have to have, that your lending company will probably want you to have, is an inspection. They'll want to come look through the house to make sure it's worth what you're potentially buying it for. And Samson's life kind of reminds me of this house. Man, it looks great on the outside. He probably has bulging biceps, nice flowing, dark hair in braids. He's probably a rugged, rough guy. His life probably looks a lot like this house on the outside. But have you ever had a house that had termite damage? That's kind of what Samson's life is. It's like the external, the outside appearance of it looks great, but from within, there's this corruption, and there's this eating away, and there's this decay that it seems to be happening, and how destructive termites can be to a home. That's exactly how I think sin works, and that's where we're at right now in Samson's life. It rarely takes us down in a single moment. Sin usually starts small. It happens with one compromise and one careless decision, one moment of giving in, and then another, and then another, and then slowly, almost invisibly, the foundation of our lives are weakened and collapse. And as we come to Judges chapter 16, Samson is living proof, I believe, of this truth. He didn't lose his strength in a single night. He didn't ruin his calling with a single decision. Instead, it was a slow, gradual fade that pulled him farther and farther away from God. In fact, that's the title of this morning's sermon, The Slow Fade of Compromise. As we come to Judges chapter 16, we see what seems to be an accelerated implosion of his life. But you need to understand that this didn't happen in just a moment's notice. This has really slowly been taking place over the course of several poor choices for Samson. And today's sermon, I'm just going to let you be braced for it early on. Today's sermon is kind of one that's going to leave us feeling like a balloon that's had all the air kind of let out of it. It's going to be a little discouraging. But if you're here next week, you're going to see the ending is different than the way things are now. All right, so let's look at the slow fade of Solomon. What caused him to drift off and drift away from God? 4 things, and here's the first. He was lured away by his lust. I just want to begin reading Judges chapter 16, verses 1 through 3, and I hope that you're following along here this morning in your own Bible so you can read it with your own eyes. It says, "Now Samson went down to Gaza and saw a harlot there, and he went into her." Right there, verse 1 of Judges chapter 16 could describe to you and should open your eyes to the fact that Samson is living a life that is far contradictory to where it is God was leading him. Notice what it says in verse 2. When it was told to the Gazites, saying, Samson has come here, they surrounded the place, and they lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. And they kept silent all night long, saying, let us wait until the morning light, then we will kill him. Now Samson lay until midnight, and at midnight he arose, and he took hold of the doors of the city gate and the two posts, and pulled them up along with the bars, and he put them on his shoulders, and he carried them up to the top of the mountain, which is opposite of Hebron. Our chapter opens up with Samson pursuing pleasure, chasing after what looks good, what will make me feel good, and he goes to Gaza and he visits a woman of the night. I'm trying to be delicate with my approach. And while he's there, his enemies find out about that he is there, and they devise this plan that we're going to wait for him, and we're going to get him when he's least expecting it, and we're going to attack him and kill him. Samson somehow is alerted to their plan. He waits till midnight, and then he goes out and he rips the gates down and carries them on his shoulders some 30 to 40 miles away into Israelite territory and lays them on top of Mount Hebron, or opposite of Mount Hebron. Why did Samson do this? What a weird thing. Why not just attack the guys who are there to kill him? Well, I was looking into this week, and there are 4 possible reasons why Samson chose to tear the gates down. First of all, he does it kind of as a demonstration of his supernatural ability. I mean, city gates. These are city gates. This isn't like, the garden fence you have surrounding your garden to keep the rabbits out. These were massive iron reinforced structures designed to keep enemies out. And by carrying them off, Samson's demonstrating to those who would watch, there's no wall, there's no army, there's no city that can contain me. Second reason why he possibly did this was to humiliate the Philistines and their God. Gaza was one of the main Philistine strongholds. It was the site of the temple of Dagon, their false god. And so by tearing out the gate, Samson symbolically is declaring, your fortress can't stop me and your God cannot protect you. It's a foreshadow of God's final victory over Dagon and the end of the chapter. Third reason why he possibly could have done this was to embarrass his enemies. You understand, don't you, the importance of city gates? A city without a gate was no city at all. The city provided safety, or the gates provided safety and protection. And a city without gates or walls was defenseless, mocked, and exposed. So Samson was turning Gaza into a laughingstock. But more importantly, I believe that this is a picture of Israel's defense. That Israel was going to be rescued through the hands of Samson, but by ultimately the hand of God. If you remember back in Judges chapter 13, Samson is living out the calling that God had intended to give him. That he was going to begin to deliver Israel out of the hands of the Philistines. And so by ripping out the gates, he was striking at the heart of the Philistine defenses, showing that Israel's God was greater than the Philistines' power. All of that to say this. I'm trying to get you to see here, Samson's first downfall really comes because his eyes are telling him a different story than reality. Have you ever had your eyes deceive you? Samson went into Gaza, into enemy territory, to sleep with a prostitute because she looked good to him. The Bible is abounding with stories from the Old Testament that could prove to be examples for you and me about how our eyes can fool us, how we shouldn't just follow what looks good. As I was sitting down, I quickly came up with 5 examples of this in the Old Testament. Let's start with the first, Eve. Great story, a well-renowned story. She thought the forbidden fruit looked good to the eyes and that it was pleasing to the stomach for food. And so she takes it and she eats it. and her whole world falls apart, and all of creation falls apart. Lot chose the area around Sodom and Gomorrah because it was well watered and would suit his flock. Yeah, it all looks great until you've got, fire and brimstone raining from heaven from God. How about Esau, who saw his brother and came in home after hunting and was famished, and he sees his brother eating a bowl of soup, and it looked good to him, and so he sold his birthright. King David saw Bathsheba taking a bath, and he desired her, and that led to fornication, and then lying, and then ultimately murder. And then who could forget Achan? Remember him? He lived during the time of Joshua, and Joshua was the general who was going into the promised land and was like kicking all the enemies out of the promised land. And one of the rules that Joshua was given by God was, do not take any of the plunder, any of the treasure for yourself. Achan couldn't help himself. He saw the thing that was shining and glittering and looked nice, and so he took the treasures and went and hid it in his tent. And when it was discovered what he had done, when they found what was hiding in his tent, it led to not only his death, but the death of his entire family. And now there's Samson, basing his most important earthly relationship on what looks good. Have your eyes ever gotten you in trouble? Have your eyes ever led you astray? Sure they have. All of us have trusted our eyes to make a good decision for us. Whether it was picking out a watermelon from the grocery store that wasn't sweet enough, or maybe it was overly ripe. It looked good on the outside. Or buying that car that sure looked nice, but was a complete piece of junk. Some have even gotten involved with the wrong relationship because the other person looked good to them. So Samson starts with this Philistine harlot, this Philistine prostitute, but pretty soon he's done with her, and now he's moving on to the next thing that looks good to him. And her name just happens to be Delilah. And his life with Delilah is going to lead to disastrous consequences. And that's the thing about lust. Lust binds us to the consequences that are waiting for us. James chapter 1, verses 14 and 15. I mean, these two verses, James could have been writing specifically about the life of Samson. Listen to what he says. He says, each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin brings forth death. I mean, that's a description of what's happening to Samson. And it all starts with this, of what he's lured away with his eyes. Now, some of the consequences of lust include these things. There's three consequences that lust provides. First of all, it distorts God's good gift of desire. Did you know that desire and lust are kind of like third cousins? They're kind of related, but one is good and one is terrible. Desire is a God-given attribute that He has given to all of us. He wants us to have desires. Desire can be a tremendous motivator, right? You desire to look good in the mirror. You desire your pants to fit. It's going to motivate you to make some changes, to eat healthy and to exercise. You desire to want to live in a better house. It's going to cause you to work harder at your job and provide and be a better manager of your money so you can afford the things that you want to afford. Desire is not wrong. Now, lust is its evil cousin. Lust is like desire on steroids, that the only reason that you're wanting it is to satisfy your own selfishness. And lust distorts God's good gift of desire. Secondly, lust leads to slavery, not freedom. How many men and women who are here today are trapped by what their eyes see on the internet? You can get off into some pretty dark places pretty easily. It's accessible on every handheld device that you own, that you touch. And some have an addiction to things their eyes should not be drawn to. Now, if I was to privately find out about your addiction and approach you and ask you if you're happy with that addiction, if you're happy with that behavior, what would your answer be? The answer would be, of course I'm not happy or satisfied with that. I would stop if I could. And so lust leads to slavery, not the freedom that you think it's going to provide. And then finally, lust ruins relationships. That's a consequence that's lasting. Again, I'm going to take you to the story of King David, whose lust for Bathsheba, his selfish desire for her, spilled over, and the consequences fell upon his family. First of all, it killed Uriah. It ruined David's reputation, and it ultimately cost him the life of his newborn baby son. Do you guys remember the song that we used to sing? Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Sing it with me. For the Father up above is looking down in love. So be careful, little eyes. Man, that's a good message for us to learn today. There's so much in this world that glitters, that shines, that looks attractive, that looks like fun, that I'm going to go chasing after, and the only thing that it does is leads to ruin. If Samson could have just realized that his eyes were deceiving him, that they were not telling him the truth, his life might not have ended the way that it did. Second component to his slow fade. Samson was attracted by lust, he was lured by lust, but notice he was enticed by lies. So Samson moves on to Delilah, he finds this other woman, and she's completely wrong for him. Her name's Delilah, and if you look her name up, do you know what her name means? Her name means delicate or feeble, or it can also mean she who weakens. Her name is so fitting, certainly in Samson's life. This beautiful woman is encouraged by the Philistines to have Samson give her his secret to his strength. And in the midst of Delilah trying to get Samson's secret drawn out of him, Samson gives her 3 lies. You can read these in verses 5 through 14, but I'm going to summarize them. In verses 6 and 7, Samson lies to Delilah and says, all right, I'll tell you my secret to my strength. If you bind me with 7 fresh cords, then I'll become weak like any other man. So Delilah's like, all right. And so while he's sleeping, she ties him up with 7 fresh cords, and then she signals for the Philistines to come in, and Samson wakes up and he flexes those biceps, and they just snap off like nothing ever happened. So the secret to his strength was not discovered. That's lie number 1. Lie number 2 is found in verses 10 through 12. And the lie that Samson tells to Delilah here in these verses is that, look, if you bind me with new ropes, ones that have never been used, then I'll be weak like any other man. By the way, I ask myself the question, maybe you're asking yourself the question too, what's the difference between fresh cords and new ropes? Interesting answer, I found out. Fresh cords were made with animal intestines. They were the things that would be dried out and used as a bow. They would also be used in instruments like harps to make the strings. And so Samson first told Delilah, tie me up with 7 fresh strands of animal intestines, which, by the way, wouldn't that be kind of a violation of his Nazirite vow, not to come into contact with things that were dead? So that didn't work, and so now we're trying new ropes. New ropes are what we think of with you would use with rope today. That you would, it's woven strands of thread that are coming together to make a rope. And this proves to be a lie as well, because she ties him up with new ropes, and that doesn't work either. The Bible says that Samson wakes up and he snaps the ropes from his arms like thread, and that was lie number 2. In verses 13 and 14, again, Samson is pressured by a nagging Delilah who wants to know the true secret to his great strength. And he fed her some line about tying the 7 braids of his hair together and kind of weaving them together in a loom with fabric. So she does this, secures it with a pin. Samson's sleeping. Delilah wakes him up and shouts, "The Philistines are upon you!" So he wakes up. He removes the pin from his hair and the loom and shakes it all off like nothing happens. That's lie number 3. I mean, you'd kind of think that Samson would kind of get a clue here, wouldn't you? I mean, don't you think he would have figured it out by now that Delilah didn't have his best interests in mind? I'm baffled by his persistent giving in to her demands. So why did he do it? A couple of reasons why I think this happened the way that it did. Scripture doesn't tell us this, but I believe Samson had a drinking problem, perhaps. We're told that on the day of his wedding feast that he threw a big drinking party, a big feast. Again, a violation of his Nazirite vow not to drink any strong drink. But that would also explain how on 3 different occasions Delilah is able to have her way and do whatever she wants to do, including tie him up, put his hair into a loom. If you're drunk and passed out, you're pretty, defenseless. I don't know. The Bible doesn't specifically say that, but it could be a possibility. But I also think the reason that he's giving into this time and time again is because that's exactly how lust works. You ever heard the phrase, love is blind? Love's not blind. Lust is. Can't see anything but the thing that looks good in front of me. And lust blinds you to the truth. And maybe that's why he repeatedly told Delilah his secret. But ultimately, here's the reason why he continues to feed her with this information. He was ensnared by loyalty. Where Samson was supposed to be having his loyalties with God, being committed to God, he's more committed to making sure that Delilah's happy with him, rather than if God is pleased with him. I got to read these verses to you. Look at Judges chapter 16, verses 15 through 17. Delilah said to Samson, "How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have deceived me 3 times and have not told me where your great strength is." It came about that when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him, that his soul was annoyed to death. I'm not going to comment on that, ladies. Verse 17, so he told her all that was in his heart and said to her, "A razor has never come on my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb, when it was convenient." That's what it should say as a footnote. I've been a Nazirite, I've been a faithful follower of God, committed to God, when it was convenient, when it was to my advantage to do so. That's what the footnote should say. "If I am shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I will become weak and become like any other man." So Delilah's constant nagging tired Samson out. Samson divulges his secret to Delilah because he's worn down by her persistence. He's blinded by his emotions of lust. He's overconfident in his own abilities. He's like, I can tell her that I'll just shake myself off. I'll save myself like I've done in all the times past. And he's a spiritually compromised man after a series of driftings away from God. This was less about one bad decision and more about a lifetime of unchecked compromise that left him vulnerable. So Samson was more committed to Delilah, who was trying to hurt him, rather than to God, who was trying to help him. So here's the problem with Samson at this point. Samson tells 3 lies, and he believed 1 lie. He told 3 lies, and he believed 1 lie. Let me read these verses in 18 through 21 and just see if you can determine the one lie that Samson believed. When Delilah saw that he had told her all that was in his heart, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come up once more, for he has told me all that is in his heart." Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands. And she made him sleep on her knees and called for a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his hair. Then she began to afflict him, and his strength left him. So she said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And he awoke from his sleep and said, "I will go out as before, as other times, and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. The Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes, and they brought him down to Gaza, and they bound him with bronze chains, and he was a grinder in the prison. Samson was lured by lust, he was enticed by lies, and ensnared by loyalty. And did you catch the one lie that he believed? He thought he was in control. He thought, I can do things that I want to do that maybe God doesn't approve of, but I can stop at any time and I'll still be in control. And he believed that he was in control, but he really wasn't. And there's one last point, because Samson has now made a full fade and he's left all alone. Verse 20 might be the saddest verse in the entire Bible. And I'm afraid that it's the summary of so many Christians' lives. It reads, "But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him." I want to talk about this just real quick. Did you notice where Samson believed his strength was from? He believed it was in his hair. He believed that, well, if you would just shave my head, I'm going to become weak like any other man. Samson's strength was not found in his hair. He may have believed that's where his strength come from, but we know where his strength came from, don't we? It came from God. That's perfectly clear by the text, because now that God is not with him, Samson is weak, Samson is vulnerable, and his enemies will come and attack him and torture him now that he's weak and now that he's vulnerable. Now here's the thing that I want us to realize and pull from verse 20 of our text today, because I'm afraid that it's a sad commentary for so many Christians. And if you're here today and you're like, oh man, I don't know if verse 20 could be a description of my life, let me just tell you, that's a good place to start. If you're worried about it, if you're worried about your salvation, if you're worried about your relationship with the Lord, that's a good place to be. Because God will receive you and accept you if you repent. But for Samson, it's like he's clueless, totally naive to the fact that God is no longer with him. Why did God depart from Samson? What's interesting in the life of Samson is that we've seen this in the history of Israel. Through the book of Judges, remember there were 7 sin cycles that we've been studying, right? First thing that happens is that Israel rebels against God. They go chasing after other false gods. Second thing that happened, God steps back and he's like, you want to chase after other gods? Good luck with that. And now they're suffering as a result of their choices. And then the third thing that happens is Israel decides, you know what? I don't like the way that I'm being treated. I want God to help me. And so they cry out to God. And then the last thing is God steps in and saves the day. We're seeing this sin cycle not happen to the entire nation of Israel. We're seeing it played out with the hero who's supposed to be the judge of the story. Samson. He decides he's going to rebel against God. That's what this whole sermon has been about today. He's taking steps away from God, doing what it is God has told him not to do. What we're going to see is that God's going to be like, fine, Samson, you want to chase after those things? Good luck with that. We'll see how you do on your own, buddy. And what's going to happen in next week's sermon as we finish out Judges chapter 16 is we're going to see Samson crying out to God one last time. And then God's going to swoop in and save the day. Samson was a man who was lured away by lust. where he was enticed by lies, where his loyalty was trapped by Delilah, and where God decided to leave him all alone. Samson's story is tragic, but here's the benefit of Samson's story. It's a mirror. Samson didn't wake up one day and decide to throw away his calling. It happened as a slow fade, step by step, compromise after compromise, shaking hands with the world until he finally is left all alone. And here's the warning. Sin always promises pleasure, but it always erodes our strength. Nobody backslides overnight. Nobody falls away from God overnight. Marriages don't collapse overnight. Faith doesn't wither overnight. It's a slow fade. There's little steps that are taken, little concessions of temptation. But here's the good news. Samson's story doesn't end with Delilah's scissors or with a Philistine prison. And your story isn't over yet either. You might be in this moment feeling distant. You might be feeling defeated. But God is just one good decision away. Maybe you feel worn down by the slow fade in your own life, the compromises that you've made. Here's the encouragement. It's not too late. Cry out to the Lord now. Where sin weakens, God can strengthen. Where failures abound, grace abounds even more. This morning we're going to offer a time of decision, a song of decision here today. And I want to use Samson as kind of a wake-up call for your life and for mine. No doubt we are flawed people. We are broken people who still serve a faithful God. That's been the title of this sermon series as we've been through Judges. I want this to be a call of repentance, not only for us as a church collectively, but more importantly for you as an individual. Let's stand together. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to invite the praise band to come forward and lead us in our song of decision.